Hello everyone. My name is Gabor Sabo, and with me is Pete Sargent. Hi, Pete.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah,
I
yeah. You need to.
recognize,
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I recognize some of the attendees as well, which is nice.
Yeah, it's nice. Just I forgot to say that you have to speak. You can't just wave because Zoom
Oh,
won't won't
yeah.
focus on you and they won't see you.
Okay,
So
all right.
yeah, but it's nice. Yeah. So again, thank you for coming on the show, or whatever
Of
webinar.
course.
Some people call it show. Okay. And While more people are still joining, let's get started. And Let's start with that. That you introduce yourself. I mean, we know we don't really know each other, but we have been working sort of together for a couple of years already. But I really don't know almost nothing about you. So please introduce yourself, and then go ahead from that.
For sure. So I've been a Perl programmer since I was about 12, which was really quite a long time ago. That's about 25 years ago. Um, and I've worked as a computer programmer for most of my commercial career. My last role was managing a team of 40 Perl developers, about half of whom I had hired myself. And during that time, I'd become disappointed with the recruiters I was using. I'd found that many of them didn't have a strong grasp of the technologies that we were using. They uh, would get Java and JavaScript confused and wouldn't really grasp the difference between PHP and Perl. And it was a very disappointing experience overall. And so when I left that job, I just thought I could do better. I just thought, I had spent a lot of time interviewing myself, both as a candidate and as a hiring manager as well. And I thought it was time to try my hand myself at recruitment. So I run Perl Careers, which is the only Perl focused recruitment agency worldwide, I think. And I also run Careers JS, which is one of a small number of JavaScript specific agencies as well. And that kind of comes out of both my having been a Perl developer and a JavaScript developer before.
So how does it work out to focus on Perl? There are not many. I don't know about any other companies really to focus on Perl that much as a hiring agency or whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how many? I don't know. How many clients do you have? How where are they located in the world?
For sure. So obviously Perl is quite a small market, and sadly often it's a market that gets smaller. But people who are committed to Perl tend to be very committed to Perl. So for many of my clients at this point, they're making a big bet on Perl. They have 5 to 20 Perl developers already. They're writing new code bases in Perl. They're using modern Perl. They're interested in Modulicious and testing properly. Um, Many of the clients we have, many people who are using Perl are companies that were e-commerce companies in around 2002, 2003, and have kept going from there. So I'd say the strongest market as a city is definitely London, but there are many companies in the US still using Perl, still hiring for Perl people. We've got a few in Australia, and then a few in some more exotic locations as well. I think one of the nice things about working with Perl and working with the Perl community is that because it is of a limited size, it really means that I'm able to, the candidates I work with, I've often spoken to before. There are some people who I've now placed in their third job. I know what they're looking for. I know what their strengths are. That's quite nice in a way. And I think with JavaScript, it's a little different. It's much bigger. Companies are able to go to almost any recruitment agency, and they won't usually get good JavaScript CVs, but they'll get some in. Whereas with Perl, I think companies have a great deal of difficulty attracting any candidates whatsoever.
Yeah, it has been a huge problem in the Perl whatever market that I've heard from companies that they really have a hard time finding good people or even any people to write Perl. Just one thing for the viewers. You can use the chat and feel free to use the chat to ask questions. I'm sure people will be happy to answer them. or we'll just filter the ones that we are not interested, but don't worry. So go ahead and type your questions while we are talking, and then we'll pick up the questions as things move forward. So how do you, okay, so there are, the one of the things that we know about the Perl job market, or I don't know, that most of the Perl developers are um, um, have a long history of writing Perl. So there are not many juniors, and I don't know. We recently saw an analysis about salaries, and we saw that I think the Perl programmers on average have the highest salary. Of course, this can be partially because people have more experience. So more experienced people have more higher salary usually. Um, do you see anyone coming in the market? How do you find? So I'm sure that some of your clients are looking for also for junior developers or less experienced people, in either because they want to pay less or because they want to have them learn on the craft in their company. How can you help them with that? Or how can someone who is interested in learning Perl and then joining a company, what can they do? Do you have any suggestions for them?
For sure. So, I mean, I think you're right that there is there's a lot of room at the bottom of the market. There's a lot of there's not that many junior developers. I think there are notably a couple of companies though that are hiring more junior people. So I know that Grant Street Group in the US hires a lot of graduates from their nearby university and teaches them Perl in the way they want it done. The company I used to be chief technical officer at, Broadbean, hired a lot of people in as junior and kind of worked them up from there. I think even if people are going in into a junior role, I think it's very important to have exposed yourself to more modern programming techniques. So I was working with a junior developer recently. He had retrained from a different career, and the fact that he had worked with Modulicious, the fact that he was active there, he had committed a little bit to GitHub there, made his CV very attractive for the people I sent it to. You know, I think it's quite a different proposition to say, well, I'm a junior developer, and I know a little bit of PHP perhaps, but I've never touched Perl, or I've written a couple of scripts, or I did a little bit of sysadmin, versus somebody who's taken the time to really kind of try and understand, to show enthusiasm for Perl. One of the principles that I like to talk about when talking about technical documents is this idea that you should try and offer proof of the things you're claiming to have expertise in. And if you just put a bunch of keywords, if you just say that you're a Perl programmer, you know, that could mean anything. A lot of people will put skills of things that they worked on maybe 5 years ago and didn't do anything else. I think if you can name specific technologies you use, you can talk about why you use them, you can give examples of when you've used them and things you liked or didn't like. I think at that point you're starting to show proof of it. And I think if you're a junior developer looking to move into Perl or any other thing, showing that you've attempted to grasp some of the software engineering tools, showing that you've learned how to use tests, showing that you've picked up a few frameworks and so on, and that you've been productive in that, I think shows a real willing there, and I think shows potential employers that you'll have an enthusiasm for the technology that you're going to be using.
Yeah, you almost answered the whole of my other questions, so I'm not sure. But one more note actually to the listeners, that if you would like to have your LinkedIn page reviewed by Pete live right now, and it's going to be recorded, so it's going to be in YouTube. Then you feel free to share it in the chat, and to your employer, your current employer. We are not looking at these CV at these LinkedIn pages because the person is right now looking for some other job. We just have a general way of trying to help people, both those people who showed their own LinkedIn page, and other people who might view the video to understand what makes a good LinkedIn page, at least in the eyes of Pete, in this case. So to help people, and so this is a so the original question that I wanted to ask you is what do you suggest to people to do in order to have better chances in finding a job, either in as a Perl developer or in or JavaScript or anything or any kind of developer at all? And you mostly answered this question. So about learning about these technologies, but how can they show this, that they learned about these things? Yeah.
So I think that if you're working on your CV or you're working on your LinkedIn profile, it's important to kind of take a step back and think about who your audience is for this document. And I like to talk about three different audiences who are going to look at your CV, three different gatekeepers really. And the first is the HR person or the recruiter. They generally are non-technical people, and their job really, and they're normally the first person to the CV to see your CV, is the person who decides whether or not your CV should then be escalated to somebody technical. And they're going to be looking to see if you have the appropriate skills for the role. And this is a lot of keyword matching. Often, and you know, this is where you kind of run into these comedy situations of people saying you need more JavaScript experience, but you know, all they can see is the Angular JS and React experience you have. And I think remembering that, you know, you do need to, you kind of need to let somebody know why they're there, you know, and I think one way to do this is the summary section. So I'm just going to segue here. I saw that Mohammed asked us if we could take a quick look.
Yeah, you can take a look at his, and then you can talk specifically about these things.
Yeah, so let's use that as
just share the screen once you have it.
Do you think you could do it on yours and share your screen?
Or shall I share it? Yeah, sure. I can do it
would
on
you?
mine.
Thank you.
Hopefully. Oh, I can show yours.
You can. I'd rather you didn't.
Actually, so anyone, so jumping ahead, if anyone wants to connect to Pete, okay. Oh, I'm not showing it actually. Oh, I forgot. So anyway, if anyone wants to connect to Pete, that's one of the best ways probably to go and find his LinkedIn page and then get a connection there. But yeah, so finally I found the share my screen button, and I think you're seeing the page, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I am indeed.
Managed. Oh, okay, so you see the LinkedIn page, right?
Sure. And why don't you click on, it's got an about section. Why don't you click on see more there?
Oh, here.
So there we go. Yeah. So
shall
somebody
I enlarge the letters, or is it fine?
It's fine for me.
Okay.
So the question that a recruiter who's looking to hire a Perl job is going to have here is, does Mohammed know Perl? Like, this is going to be question number one. And his tagline there is organizer at Perl Weekly Challenge. That's a pretty good clue he knows Perl. And then that second paragraph is about to is talking about all sorts of different Perl stuff that he's done. He's been part of the CPAN's authors group. And I think this is good. I think, you know, trying to be explicit here and trying to let the recruiter or the HR person know that they are in the right place is a really good idea. So, you know, often if you see job ads, they'll say looking for a Perl developer with X years of experience. I think you can really be kind of on the nose with this. I think you can lead with a sentence that says, I am a Perl developer with X years of experience. And this is something that Mohammed has done, you know, pretty explicitly here. He hasn't used those exact words, but we have Perl all around this. You know that he's a programmer straight away. So I think from the hiring manager's perspective, when a hiring manager is seeing this, they're going to know that yes, this is the right kind of person for them. And actually, then I said hiring manager, but I meant recruiter. The hiring manager is the next person who's going to see this. If the recruiter or the HR person is happy with this, if they think, yeah, Mohammed is a Perl developer here, they're going to be looking to see, have you mentioned interesting auxiliary skills to Perl? Some people just write a whole list of keywords. You know, they say Perl, they say Python, they say JavaScript, they say Ruby. If you dig in here, though, what Mohammed has done is he's talked about a lot of Perl related technologies. Looking at this, a technical person is going to know he's not just kind of looked at Perl, he's used Perl in several different ways. He's got experience with the different OO systems there. He's been playing with Dancer 2 and DBIX class. This kind of falls into the proof section. This is clearly somebody who didn't just write a few Perl scripts once. This is somebody who is, clearly quite interested in Perl. The first two people, the first two of our gatekeepers here, are going to be very happy with Mohammed's CV there. The only thing I think I would add in this section is to remember that the third person here, or the third set of people who are going to see this, is future colleagues. When you go and get interviewed, some companies have a big process around it. Some companies say that they have a big process around it. But usually you're going to be interviewed by a random selection of future co-workers who the hiring manager was able to find that were free. That there's not much kind of thought goes into it. And these people as well, they're not professional interviewers, they're programmers. They're programmers like you and me. They're going to look at your CV and they're going to think, I have to find something to say. Ideally, you've put stuff on your CV that they can talk about, because otherwise they're going to start asking you random programming trivia and so on. And so things that are interesting to programmers are also a great idea to put on there. One thing I love about what Mohammed's got here is that he talks about having contributed 78 modules to CPAN. Now, if I was a developer sitting down interviewing him, that is a great place to start. I think what I might do is I might pull out some of those specifically. I know if this was a CV that didn't have the opportunity to say that he was the organizer at the Perl Weekly Challenge, I think I might add that right at the top of the CV. Again, it gives people a chance to gives people something to talk about in the interview. It gives a technical person who sat down with you at interview time something to latch onto there, some way of you driving the conversation. Does that make sense?
To me, yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
He might be able to reply in the chat, but not say anything. Yeah, but to me, yes.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Let's scroll down a little and let's have a quick look at the experience that he's got, and then we'll move on to something else. But let's have a quick look at it. Hang on. Okay. Again, I really like the fact he's brought up that he's the Perl Weekly Challenge organizer. However, people who aren't Mohammed are not the Perl Weekly Challenge organizers, so they're not going to be able to put that in. But let's look at system developer NTT Communications. Could you hit the see more button there again, please? Yeah. So I think I might do this slightly differently. My understanding is that NTT Communication is a Perl shop, and that he is using Perl there. I think for that reason, I would start to, again, prove rather than say the things that you were doing there. I think I would start to pick out specific Perl modules you used and specific interesting things you found with it. So for example, let's say, I don't think any of the things he's written there really kind of bring to life what he's doing and what skills he's doing. They're quite business oriented, which is fine if you're a consultant, but I think if you're going in for a Perl job, you really kind of want to lay it on thick there. You want to talk about how your current role is Perl. If NTT Communications is a Perl place, even if your actual job title there is system developer, I would write Perl developer / system developer. Put two job titles there. Put your real one, which is that you're a Perl developer, and then put your official one too. Because if somebody's coming in and they're using your recruitment tool, it's going to bring up Mohammed's current job title as system developer, which is fine and all, especially if it's system developer and he's got Perl everywhere else. But what he really wants to be recognized for in this case is a Perl developer. Or let's say it's a JavaScript CV and he's system developer, but what he's doing all day is Node.js on Express. I would write Node.js developer / system developer. I mean, really lay it on thick. You can't be too obvious here. And I think in terms of the work experience there, I think, again, I would harp on about the skills that you are using. I don't think that you're providing very much value there by saying that you're working as part of the core OSS team. Like that doesn't mean anything to anybody who doesn't work at NGT Communications. That you report to the development manager for day-to-day activities. Again, so what? Write the stuff that people are going to potentially, people who are going to hire you potentially are going to be most interested in, and that is going to be the technologies that you are using for developers.
Right. So how would it change if all of your suggestions, if Mohammed decides that no, he wants to look for something else now, not Perl. He has been a Perl developer for, I don't know, 20 years now. I don't know. He is very central in the Perl community, both because of the Perl Weekly Challenge, because of being the editor of the Perl Weekly newsletter, and because of all those tons of CPAM modules he does, and all of the stuff he is doing. But what if he today or tomorrow, or I don't know, months from now, decides that he wants something else?
Mm-hmm. So let's say he decides he wants to be a Haskell developer instead, which is very different from Perl. I still think in terms of the work experience and so on, you can pull out, you want to make your previous work experience sound similar to the job that you want there. And so let's say again that he's looking for a Haskell development role, and he's trying to.
Do you want to point out things? Sorry to interrupt. Do you want to point out things in the LinkedIn page, or shall we
let's pull up that? Let's pull up that system developer job title again. So let's scroll down a little bit. Again, it doesn't really matter what the specific technology there is. Ideally, and if you are trying to highlight that, as we've talked about, you've got a lot of opportunity. But developers do lots of the same kind of things that have cross-language appeal. So I think you could talk about planning test cases. You could talk about how you refactored certain bits to be easier to test. You could talk about an MVC or ORM framework that you were using. I think if you're trying to switch technologies and the job you're in right now isn't that relevant, I still think you can pull out things that show you're a good software engineer, things that show that you are a good developer who does regular kind of development things with whatever stack that is. You know, these things still have some relevance there. And I think that's what you would want to pull out. Again, working as part of the core OSS team or reporting to the development manager doesn't tell me anything about his competencies there. It doesn't tell me that he's somebody who has, you know, who has used an ORM before, for example. And, you know, many of these ORMs, many of these frameworks, many of testing tools have language independent, have language independent types. You know, they're the same kind of idea in many languages. You still need to get those mental models in. So I think that's what I would focus on.
Thanks.
I'm noticing actually, so we've got a comment from Helmut saying most recruiters don't read the info carefully, and he gets a lot of spam on LinkedIn, terrible mismatches. And I think that's absolutely true. So I guess what I'm saying here is that the advice I'm giving here, I think, is equally important for your CV or resume as it is on LinkedIn. I think your LinkedIn should really be essentially a carbon copy of what's your LinkedIn, your CV should be the same there. You are, even with your CV though, you are going to get recruiters skimming it. But there's a process there. So I tend to think that if I look at a CV, I can tell if somebody's going to be appropriate in about 45 seconds. But the reason for that is that the only decision I have to make as the HR person, as the recruitment person, is whether or not I forward that on to the technical manager or not. The technical manager is going to look at it much more carefully. So absolutely, recruiters do not read this info carefully, but that's because the only thing the recruiter is trying to work out is should they forward it on to the technical person who will look at it much more carefully at that point. And you know, they will look at it to some degree, but when your CV is really going to get pulled apart is when you're actually in the interview itself. Does that make sense? Each person along this chain is trying to get different stuff from your CV. And the recruiter and the HR person, is looking at it, like Helmut says, in about
Yeah.
30 seconds.
So yeah, what you're talking about, I think, is more when sort of like the inbound CVs that arrive to you, and I think that Helmut is mostly talking about when recruiters contact him, and I also get lots of contacts from companies offering me all kind of jobs. Some of them are not even relevant to my actual even like the content. So recently I got an offer from someone to be a SAP consultant, and the only one place I have mentioned actually SAP on my CV because SAP was a client of mine for some totally unrelated project. Okay, I think doing some automation for them. Okay, so and this is not really nice from the person who's receiving all these offers. Oh, and the other set of offers I get is that most of the offers I get are full-time jobs, while I am a consultant and I have been a consultant for 20 years now. Okay, and that's what I have on first line on my LinkedIn page, that I do contract work, and still you get this. And I know I don't expect you to defend all the other people who don't do their job properly, but I think that's what he's talking about.
I'm sure, but there's a valuable lesson in this, and the valuable lesson there is that recruiters are bad at their jobs. Like, recruiters aren't especially diligent. If you want to make your CV stand out, you need to make it as obvious as possible. If you are looking for a Perl development role, if you're looking for a Node role, if you're looking for something else, be as explicit as possible. You're always going to get a fair amount of spam coming in. What you don't want is you don't want to miss out on stuff because you weren't explicit enough about what it is you can do.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know. I just scrolled back to the title, the top part of the page. The fact that Muhammad writes organizer at Perl Weekly Challenge. Well, it says the word Perl there, but it in itself doesn't say anything about his actual job that he might look for. So I wonder if this is not a detract whatever this. So whether it's a good title for him, or if you would emphasize more the actual job that he might be looking for.
I think realistically, a recruiter is going to type Perl in, and anything that comes up that doesn't look terrible, they're going to click through on. And I think very quickly, look at his CV, it's obvious that he is a Perl developer. So there was a comment in the webinar chat about the acceptability of remote working.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
And how has it changed as presumably as a result of coronavirus? I think that companies, ironically, you've got this point at the moment where companies don't really know what they're doing. First of all, the job market is very tight at the moment. There are a lot of people on furlough, or a lot of people who don't have the roles that they want at the moment. And all the people I'm speaking...
I'll just stop the sharing, okay? Sorry.
Sure. All the companies I'm speaking to, if I ask them, are they going fully remote? They have no idea. There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. I suspect, though, that companies are going to not want to give up on the chance of paying a lot less rent for their office spaces. I think as well, most companies have been forced to confront the fact that people can be relatively productive, work at home, and so on. So I think we're going to see improvement in that. I think it's a bit too early to see it. The clients that I have who are hiring remotely are the clients who were hiring remotely before any of this. The candidates that I've placed at companies who are generally on site, of course, have started as remote workers. I think it's a little too early to talk about what the impact will be there. I think most companies are still kind of waiting to see what happens. And yeah, I think I'm very hopeful that it will be an advantage. Although one kind of negative point, if you're a programmer there, is if geography becomes less important, your competition pool is suddenly a lot bigger at that point, which is something to consider.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger, and a lot more people can afford to work for a much lower salaries. I mean, if you live in a big city in the in Europe usually, or the States, or in these places where the cost of living is high, um, then you can't actually work for a lower salary. While if someone even in the US, if someone is living in the rural area where the cost of living is one third of that of California, then they already can be competing not only on not not just on their knowledge, but also by the fact that they can work for less money. And I'm sure companies will love that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
if you
so I
if
think that's, I think, yeah, I think that is going to be a disadvantage of it. But again, I think it's too early to know at this point.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know. I'm a big believer of remote work or distributed work, and I have been listening to podcasts about it, reading books about this way before we were forced to be remote, and I think that's. I mean, it might not be like stay the norm right now, but that's sort of the tendency. I think that more companies will recognize that, oh, you don't have to stand behind the back of the person and see that they are present and then assume that then they are working, but um, they can also work remotely all the time. And but it will require, I think, a lot of change from management as well, because that's probably one of the biggest problems. My fear actually is that because we were forced to work remotely now, and because it wasn't a well-designed how we do this, so everyone had their children at home, and everyone in the family was at home, and they were all trying to figure out how to work at the same time from the same location. And so this might be actually might have a negative effect on how people perceive working remotely, because this is not what you would like, right? You would like to have you would like to have some quiet corner where you can work, but many people can't have right now. Okay. So, yeah, one of the comments here that the communication is the main issue working remotely, which is right. But you, Pete, have been working remotely basically, right? So, I mean, you don't go to your clients, do you?
For sure, I've been
So,
working remotely, and in fact, I've been working remotely as a Perl developer as well
yeah.
as a recruiter. I think it has been interesting. A client I'm doing some work for at the moment had a partial remote policy, but has now gone fully remote. And I think one advantage of that for me is that everybody is there still on the same footing at that point. I think when you have people who are in an office and some people who aren't in an office, it's very easy for not everybody to be for not everybody to be as included there. When everybody is remote, communication then is all primarily remote, and so I think that has been an advantage there.
Yeah, I think one of the ways is described is that instead of using the word remote working, some people call it distributed working, because remote sort of indicates that there is a center and there are remotes, while distributed sort of indicates that everyone is just floating around and somewhere. So really, how was it for you to switch from being a programmer to being someone who is hunting programmers?
I
Don't you miss programming?
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely miss programming. But I still do a fair amount of programming, so
Mm.
that helps. Much of the back-end system that we use at Perl Careers is stuff that I've written there. And I think as well, I've been having a lot of fun recently with Docker and other tools for uh, other tools for deployment. I think one thing that programmers often struggle with or worry about is feeling that new technologies are passing them by. So a site that I read a lot is Hacker News. And every day on there, you see stories about Kubernetes, you see stories about other tooling that people's using. For me, I feel like I'm always seeing stories about Rust, and I'm always thinking, oh, I wish my Rust skills were a little better. And so I think one of the challenges of being a developer is feeling that you are up to date with your skill set. Um, and I think, I think that for developers looking for career development opportunities, making sure that they are having a chance both professionally and privately to play with new technologies that come up is very important there. Um, I think one particular way that you can make sure that your skills. Let's say you're a Perl developer and you are worried by the state of the Perl market. One of the ways that you can make sure that your skills are relevant, that you are able to jump to perhaps another senior role there, is to look at these deployment tools, to look at these testing tools, and to some degrees to look at front end tools and making sure that you have a good enough grounding there, seeing if you can introduce them in the places that you work, seeing if you can use them for open source projects. I think this is something that's underrated as a way of making sure that your skills remain marketable.
Right. That's that. Yeah. That's. I remember once we discussed with some, I think, people in the one of the Perl conferences about how um, well your knowledge can be transferred to other companies. And that's one of the issues that we talked about specifically about Perl, that it's getting less and less used, so people will want less to learn it because it's less transferable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what you're also saying here is to gain other technologies that can be used with Perl, or maybe alternative technologies that are maybe more transferable to other companies,
Right,
right?
and I think another way of doing that is also to make sure that you are maxing out the the technologies you're using with Perl. So let's take Plack PSGI for example. So for anybody listening who's not a Perl developer, Plack PSGI is what do they call them? Super glue for web frameworks. But essentially, it is a connector between application code and the web server on the other hand.
Yeah.
However, of course, it's not a Perl development. In Python, you have UWSGI. In Ruby, you have Rack, and so on. If you use the technologies that are available to you in Perl, looking at MVC frameworks, for example, and making sure you understand controllers and routing, all of this is going to be stuff that is very applicable if you work on another dynamic language there. If you absolutely understand how Modulicious works, if you are absolutely on top of use of an ORM like DBIX class, if you're very used to writing great test suites in Perl, you are not going to find switching to Python or Ruby if it requires it to be all that challenging. You've already got the difficult concepts there, and if you've learned them with Perl, so much the better. And perhaps you'll be able to convince people to move to Perl. Although still using Perl and making sure that you really understand the tooling you've got available to you in Perl is going to be very valuable if you can draw the parallels to this if you're applying for a non-Perl job.
Perl 7 was just announced. I don't know how much you have read about it. So, like Perl 5 was like 25 years we have been using Perl, and just increasing
Mm.
the minor version number after 5, and now Sawyer, who is the lead developer, I think, I don't know how to, the pumpkin of Perl, the lead developer of the Perl community, let's say, decided that I don't know how much it's alone and how much is in the whole team, that they're going to release, change the version number to 7 and make certain changes to the language. What do you think? How does this impact the job market, the Perl job market?
I don't have any idea. So Perl 7 is obviously, it's being touted as, what is it, 5? It's actually 5.32. Yeah, okay. And I suspect it's going to be a little while until we see the first Perl labeled as Perl 7. You know, there are a lot of things to take into consideration there. The fact that you've got system Perl on many systems. You know, they're going to have a Perl 7 binary and a Perl 5 binary, like you have a Python 2 and a Python 3. I feel like it's going to be
right.
very...
I think that they are going to have I mean, I don't know if they can replace the system Perl, because this is not going to be fully backward compatible, right? So certain flags are different, so you might need to make changes to your code, and many people don't want to make changes to their code because they don't have, let's say, tests to verify that it's still working, even though they should work. But I mean, a lot of people are afraid of this, so they're going to be probably in parallel, like in Python 2 and Python 3. But I think they're going to release it in a couple of months, something which is called Perl 7, without a lot of changes, but still.
I think it will take a long time before that shows up as a differentiating factor in the job market. I think now my hope and aspiration there is that, you know, we get Curtis Poe's core system into the core, and that, you know, this all leads to a Perl resurgence. That's obviously kind of my hope there. I think it's going to take a while for that to happen. I think people have a lot of very fixed ideas about what Perl is and what Perl can do. And people very definitely have a lot of fixed ideas about the relative strength and weaknesses of Perl. My hope is, you know, obviously that Perl 7 leads to a resurgence of new people coming to it. But we'll see. I see that Mohammed's asked if we think that once it's released, will people call themselves Perl 5 or Perl 7 developers? Maybe. So I feel like a long time ago, people were keen to point out they were Perl 5 rather than Perl 4 developers. And these days, people talk about being modern Perl developers. I think perhaps, you know, maybe describing yourself as a Perl 7 developer will be the new describing yourself as a modern Perl developer. But I think the core of it is, you know, companies will be looking for Perl developers, and experience with Perl 7 will be seen as an advantage because it shows that you're very interested in Perl.
Right. It's going to be interesting. It's definitely very interesting. Right. Any more questions there in the chat group? And while they are might be thinking about more questions, would you like to add something more that we haven't covered earlier? Something that you thought about that you would like to say?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk a little bit, to talk a little bit about how, when we get inbound CVs, what our process is for dealing with them.
I mean, talking about the Perl Career, or
talking about Perl Careers, but also I think talking about what this means for people when writing their CV.
Okay.
So we've got a questionnaire that we send people. We often get CVs that come in that do mention Perl and people applying for things. And I really feel that if you're applying for a certain role, be expansive in the technology that you're talking about there. So I would say about a third of CVs we get in, we send them back this questionnaire, and they fill out this questionnaire, and we just put it in as the cover letter for their CV. And I think some people get hired just off the basis of their answers to it. But when people are looking for Perl developers, they're looking for people who have worked on bigger systems with Perl. So we ask people to describe the large Perl-based systems that they've worked in. and any large integrated modular code bases in Perl. We want them to talk about the build steps, any automated testing, the CPAN dependencies, the documentation. Again, all of this is is proof of skills there, because you can call yourself a Perl developer, but if you actually are a Perl developer, you'll have all of this experience in sort of these auxiliary skills. And I think these are very worth bringing up. We ask people to be explicit about modern Perl that they've used: Moose or Moo, DBIX class, Dancer, Modulicious, Catalyst. What amazes me every time is that we'll have gotten a CV in from somebody where Perl is mentioned perhaps twice. We send them this questionnaire and we get back these reams of information on their Perl experience that they for some reason didn't feel was appropriate to put on their CV in the first place. And I think in a lot of these cases, people are missing out when they submit their CVs on this technical information that would really kind of bolster what they've got there. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. We have a new question here about I don't know, it's development frameworks. I don't know if this is really the right word for Agile and Scrum or
Sure. Yeah. I think that exposure to it is interesting and useful, and I think it will be somewhat interesting if they put it on the job description. You know, a recruiter is going to care. I don't know. When I was hiring people, it wouldn't have entered into my hiring decision at all. And I've never, ever had a candidate rejected for not having experience of Agile or Scrum or Kanban or any of the other development methodologies. I think it's a nice to have, but I'm not sure. If you come to a job having been in a company that's done Scrum badly for 5 years, I'm not sure you're coming in with anything you're bringing there.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think assume that you will be able to pick up everything you need to know about Scrum and Agile from the company that's doing it, rather than thinking it's a big deal. I think if you're going in for a development lead position or something, then maybe there is some value in that, in showing that you care more about the commercial processes. But again, I've never had feedback there from a client, negative or positive, about people's Agile experience or lack thereof.
Yeah, about just one comment. I already started to say that I think that every company uses the Agile for something else, the word Agile for something else. And even Scrum, although it's well defined, I mean, every company I went to, and I do consulting to many companies, they use something totally different and they still call it Scrum. So I'm really not. I wouldn't say that it's. I mean, it's a good thing to experience it, but don't think that what one company called Agile is the same as some other company calling Agile. Yeah, and the one more thing that I wanted to add is about the communication. I thought about the communication is that. I think Mohammed mentioned that is one of the biggest problems when you have distributed or remote workers, the communication. And that just brought me there is this idea that when you are recruiting someone and you have the interview, and then you are asking questions and trying to get the person explain what the project they worked on, and many times people can't really explain that. And this is just suddenly connected to me to the idea of me recommending people to write blog posts, which is useful for all kind of things, and partially is useful for the idea that you need to express yourself better, write full sentences, and explain technologies or ideas by yourself, which is many of us lack that capability, especially people who are not. Whose mother tongue is not English. Okay, so like Pete has a huge advantage over us many of us, many of the people I see in the attendees now, who are probably, at least based on their name, their mother tongue is not English. And so if you need to express yourself in English on the technology areas, which is just, again, communication, it's a slightly different one than what you, Mohammed, thought about. But I think you can write blog posts and practice that way. And it seems that our internet connection is getting unstable now. So I think it's a sign. Anything else you wanted to say? How can people get in touch with you? What is the best way to get in touch with you?
So via email. When email comes in, we have a good system for dealing with email, and I read all of them and we respond to all of them. So it's peak@perl.careers, and you can find our website either by Googling Perl Careers or it's at perl.careers. And for Careers.js, it's careersjs.com.
Okay, thank you very much. I will put the links under the video, and I put your email under the video if you like, and so people can contact you. And thank you very much for coming onto the webinar and answering all these questions. Thank you for your time.
Perfect.
And
thank you
everyone.
Very much, Gabor.
And thanks everyone for joining us, and hope to see you at one of the upcoming webinars again. So bye-bye.